I was 7 years old the summer the sky changed color. At least that's how I remember it. Maybe it didn't happen the way I think it did. Maybe time and fear have rewritten the truth into something more dramatic. But every time I close my eyes, I can still feel the warmth of that afternoon, the metallic taste of the air, and the quiet before everything broke. My name is Eliam Ortega, and I grew up in a small coastal town in northern Spain called Rivamar. It was a quiet place in 1999, a town of narrow alleys, white-painted houses, and the sound of the ocean echoing off the cliffs. My parents worked long hours, so I spent most of that summer with my grandparents in their 7th-floor apartment overlooking the port. My grandmother Rosa was patient, endlessly gentle, always humming old Catalan songs when she cooked. My grandfather Mateo was a former dock worker who had gone half-deaf from years of machinery and waves, so he mostly read the newspaper in silence, muttering about the government. Their apartment smelled of olive soap and lemon polish. The balcony faced west, straight toward the sea and the line of mountains that framed the horizon like sleeping beasts. As a child, I had a wild imagination, the kind adults say is charming until it starts to frighten them. I used to believe God lived behind the clouds, watching everything. Not in a vague, abstract way, I saw him in my mind vividly. A giant face without a body, floating high above the mountains, hair made of mist and stars, eyes that glowed faintly like the moon behind a curtain. Sometimes I imagined those long, cloud-like strands brushing the ground, painting rivers and forests into existence with every motion. My grandmother would laugh when I told her. "You see God everywhere, Eliam," she'd say, kissing my forehead. But at night when I lay awake in the guest room, I wasn't sure if I found it comforting or terrifying, the thought that something so enormous might be looking right at me. That July, the heat was unbearable. Even the gulls seemed tired, drifting low over the rooftops. The world felt half asleep. One evening, my grandmother and I sat together on the balcony. She was reading Don Quixote while I played with my Tamagotchi, trying to keep the tiny pixelated creature alive. I remember her hand resting softly on the armrest, the sunlight catching the silver ring she always wore. Everything felt still, like time had stopped to listen. Then the building shook. It was faint at first, like a heavy truck passing on the street below. Then stronger. My drink wobbled on the table. A pigeon took off suddenly from the railing. I thought it was an earthquake. We'd had small tremors before. But when I looked down through the concrete slats, the people on the street were walking normally. Cars gliding past, not a single sign of alarm. "Abuela?" I called, but she wasn't there anymore. The sliding door behind me was open, and the sound of running water came faintly from inside. She must have gone to the kitchen. I stayed on the balcony. Maybe I wanted to be brave. Maybe I was too curious for my own good. The trembling faded, but something else took its place. A low hum in the air, almost like a deep musical note only the bones could hear. The sky had shifted from gold to a dull pink, and the sea far beyond shimmered strangely, as if oil floated on its surface. I looked toward the mountains and saw one that hadn't been there before. At first, I thought my mind was playing tricks. The haze of sunset could make shadows seem larger, blur outlines. But this shape was different. The mountains around Rivamar were soft and sloping, green with pine and olive. This one was a jagged silhouette, blacker than night, rising sharply with impossible angles, its peak uneven and twisted like fingers reaching upward. It looked wrong. That's the only word that fits. Wrong, as if nature itself hadn't agreed to its existence. I stared for a long time, waiting for it to fade. It didn't. The more I looked, the clearer it became. And then, it moved. At first I thought it was a trick of the clouds. But the base of the thing shifted slightly to one side, then the other, like legs taking hesitant steps. The upper part swayed, casting a shadow that spread unnaturally fast over the town. My breath caught in my throat. The air felt heavy, thick, as if gravity had doubled. The mountain was walking. I tried to shout for my grandparents, but my voice came out as a whisper. I told myself it was a hallucination, that maybe the heat or the glare of the sun was confusing me. But my Tamagotchi beeped suddenly, the sound sharp and alive, and in that moment I knew I wasn't dreaming. Dreams don't make machines work. The black shape advanced slowly, each movement rippling through the sky. It didn't crush anything, and it passed through things. Houses, towers, entire blocks. Its form blurred as if half-transparent, a ghost of something far too large to exist. Every time it took a step, the hum grew louder, and the clouds above twisted like they were being pulled into its body. I gripped the balcony rail. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked, then stopped abruptly. The thing stopped moving. For a heartbeat, the world went silent. Then an eye opened. It wasn't an eye in the normal sense. No sclera, no iris, no motion. Just a perfect circle of white light near the top of that mountainous body, like a hole punched through the dark. And in the center of that light, a single pinprick of black, a pupil that was looking directly at me. I froze. Every childish notion of God I'd ever imagined came crashing into that moment. I thought, this is him. This is what I'd been seeing all along. But if it was God, then he hated me. I felt it in my bones, a vast, ancient loathing that went beyond anger. Like the universe itself regretted that I existed. My fingers dug into the railing. I couldn't move. The hum turned into a sound, a groaning like grinding metal, echoing from nowhere and everywhere. The light in its eye grew brighter. My skin felt cold, my heart beat too loud. Something rose from its head, shapes like roots, or tentacles, or enormous fingers made of smoke. They writhed in slow, deliberate movements, pointing toward me as if deciding what to do. One of them reached out. The tentacle, or whatever it was, slithered downward, growing more solid as it neared. When it touched the building, part of the balcony cracked and fell away like dust. A second later, it wrapped around my legs. I screamed. The pain wasn't like being burned or cut. It was like being unmade. Everything inside me, my memories, my thoughts, my sense of self, felt like they were being pulled apart and scattered. I clung to the railing with both hands, screaming for my grandmother, for my mother, for anyone. The cold deepened. The air around me vibrated. I felt my body lifting off the ground, the pressure tearing at my knees. Then everything went white. When I opened my eyes, I was dangling from the railing, the concrete cutting into my palms. My grandmother was crying, pulling at my arms, shouting my name. The tentacle was gone. The mountain was gone. The sky was still pink, calm, quiet. Birds flew in circles as if nothing had happened. I collapsed into her arms, sobbing so hard I couldn't breathe. She kept saying, you're safe, but her voice was trembling too. Later that night, my parents arrived, furious and terrified. They yelled at her for leaving me alone, then at me for climbing where I shouldn't have. But I hadn't climbed. A piece of the balcony had collapsed, the inspector said later, some structural weakness in the concrete. That's what they believed, I didn't argue. I never told them what I'd seen, but I knew the truth. The balcony hadn't given way by accident. Something had touched it, and whatever it was, it had known my name. I didn't sleep that night. Even after my parents drove me home, even after they tucked me into bed and turned off the lights, I could still hear it. That low hum, somewhere beneath the earth. Like the sound of a cello string stretched too tight, vibrating endlessly. When I closed my eyes, I saw flashes. The shape of the eye, the twisting sky, the balcony breaking. And underneath it all, a strange rhythm, almost like a whisper, repeating a sound that wasn't quite a word. Eliam, that's what it said. My name echoing from nowhere. The next morning, my legs were bruised black and purple from my ankles up to my knees. My mother thought I had banged them against the railing, but I knew it wasn't that. The marks were too precise, too clean, almost like the fingers of a giant hand had pressed into my skin. For days afterward, the world felt slightly off. The sunlight seemed sharper, too white. The shadows in corners looked deeper than they should. And sometimes, when I turned my head quickly, I thought I saw movement, a ripple in the air, as if something enormous had just passed through the room and vanished. My grandmother came to visit a week later, bringing a tin of almond cookies. She tried to act normal, but I could tell she was scared. When my mother stepped out of the room, she knelt beside me and whispered, Eliam. What happened that day? Really? Her eyes were full of something between love and dread. I wanted to tell her everything. About the mountain, the eye, the way it had looked straight into my soul. But when I opened my mouth, nothing came out. It was like the words had been erased from my tongue. I could only whisper, it touched me. Her face went pale. She pressed a trembling hand to her chest, then reached into her bag. I brought you something, she said, forcing a smile. From the bag, she pulled out a small wooden cross, the kind you could hang above a bed. This will keep you safe, Mia Moore. Promise me you'll sleep with it close, I promised. And that night, when I lay in bed with the cross under my pillow, I finally fell asleep. But safety never came. In the dream, I was standing again on the balcony. But this time, everything was wrong. The city below was silent, frozen in gray light. The ocean had turned solid, a sheet of black glass stretching to infinity. And the sky was filled with clouds that twisted like smoke, forming shapes that almost looked like faces, some smiling, some screaming. Then I felt it again, the tremor. But this time it wasn't under the ground. It was inside my chest. Each beat of my heart shook the world around me, and with every tremor, I heard that whisper, you are seen. I turned toward the mountains, and there it was. The dark shape closer now, its eye burning like a hole in reality. Its mouth, or what I thought was its mouth, opened slowly, revealing not teeth but hundreds of smaller eyes, blinking and turning in unison, all focused on me. I tried to run, but my feet sank into the ground like mud. When I screamed, no sound came out, only that same low hum vibrating through the air. Then a voice, calm and deep, spoke directly into my mind. Do not pray to what you do not understand. And before I could move, the blackness swallowed me whole. I woke up gasping, the sheets soaked in sweat. The cross under my pillow had splintered in half. When my mother saw it the next morning, she said I must have rolled over it in my sleep. But I remembered what I'd heard in the dream, that warning. Do not pray to what you do not understand. It was strange because I hadn't prayed since that day on the balcony. Every time I tried, I felt watched. Not by God, but by something else, something older. Weeks passed. Summer ended. My parents stopped talking about the accident, though I'd catch them whispering sometimes in the kitchen, glancing toward me like I was a puzzle they didn't want to solve. I returned to school, tried to live normally, but the marks on my legs never fully disappeared. Under certain light, they shimmered faintly, not like bruises, but like symbols. Thin, looping lines that moved when I stared at them too long, like ink alive under my skin. When autumn came, my grandmother called. Her voice trembled through the receiver. Eliam, Carino, something strange happened here. What do you mean? I asked. The workers who repaired the balcony, they found something. They didn't tell your grandfather at first, but one of them came to me privately. He said when they broke apart the damaged concrete, they found colors underneath, colors that shouldn't exist. She paused. I could hear the sound of the sea through her open window. He said it looked like paint, but it glowed. And it wasn't on the surface. It was inside the concrete like veins. My heart started to race. What did they do with it? They covered it up. Said it was a mineral reaction. But Eliam? Her voice dropped to a whisper. It formed a shape. A circle with lines coming out of it. Like an eye. That night I couldn't eat. Couldn't think. I walked to the bathroom and stared at myself in the mirror. My reflection looked pale, older somehow, like the face of someone who'd seen too much. Behind me, for just a second, I thought I saw something. A faint outline of a mountain shifting slowly across the reflection. When I turned around, there was nothing there. I started leaving the lights on when I slept. By the time winter arrived, I thought maybe it was over. The dreams had faded. The bruises had turned to faint scars. But then one morning my teacher called me to her desk. Eliam, she said gently, are you feeling all right? You've been drawing some unusual things. I looked down. On the paper in front of me, without remembering doing it, I had drawn a black shape, tall and uneven, with what looked like an eye in the center. Around it, smaller stick figures stood on a balcony reaching up. And above them, written in shaky letters, were 3 words. He is not gone. That night, I tore the drawing into pieces and threw it out. But later, when I went to brush my teeth, I noticed something in the mirror again, faint on the glass. A handprint. Large, smeared like someone had pressed their palm against it from the inside. I wiped it away. It came back the next morning. By the time I turned 8, I had stopped talking about it entirely. My parents seemed relieved. My grandmother prayed for me every day until the year she died. For a while, life went on. School, friends, birthdays. The world looked normal again, but sometimes when the wind blew from the west, I'd hear it again, that low hum somewhere beneath the horizon. And I'd know that the mountain was still out there, waiting. Years later, when I was 21, I returned to Rivamar for the first time. My grandparents' apartment had been sold, but the building was still there, taller now with new paint and solar panels on the roof. I stood across the street staring up at that balcony. Someone had hung plants there, vines spilling down over the railing, swaying softly in the breeze. Then I noticed something strange. Just below the plants, faintly visible in the afternoon light, was a discolored patch on the concrete, circular, with thin branching lines reaching outward, the mark of an eye. And as I watched, a tremor ran through the ground. Not strong enough for anyone else to notice, just a single heartbeat of vibration. But deep inside that pulse, I heard it again. A voice, older than the earth. You were never forgotten. The day it came back was so ordinary it almost felt cruel. The sun was gentle, the streets were alive with laughter, and for the first time in years, I felt almost normal. I had moved into a small apartment outside Madrid, an aging building with thin walls and balconies that overlooked a park. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I worked remotely as a translator, rarely went out, rarely spoke to anyone. I told myself the silence was peace, not fear. That morning, I made coffee, opened the window, and let the air in. Children were playing below. The world felt alive, ordinary, tangible. I remember thinking that maybe, finally, it was over. Maybe whatever had haunted my childhood had been nothing more than the mind of a frightened boy trying to make sense of a falling balcony. I wanted to believe that. I truly did. But belief doesn't change truth. It began subtly. The hum returned first. That same low vibration. That impossible sound that seemed to come from inside my bones rather than from the air. I froze mid-sip. The cup rattled against the saucer. I looked out toward the horizon. The park was emptying. The wind had died completely. Even the leaves stopped moving. Then a faint tremor rippled through the building. At first, I thought it was just a passing truck. But when I looked at the glass of water on my desk, I saw the ripples, slow, rhythmic, steady, like footsteps. My throat tightened. Every instinct screamed for me to run, but where could I go? I was 7 again, clinging to a balcony rail, waiting for something I didn't understand to devour me. The sunlight dimmed. Outside, the sky began to pale, then twist, as if unseen hands were kneading it into new shapes. Clouds formed out of nowhere. Long, dark streaks that coiled like ink dropped into water. And beneath them, the horizon seemed to rise. No, not rise. Move. Shift. A jagged shadow was emerging again, distant but unmistakable. The mountain. It was further than before, yet still massive enough to dwarf everything. Its outline trembled, unfocused, like a mirage seen through heat. But I knew that shape. The uneven peak, the void-black texture, the hollow at its center where the eye had once opened. My body moved on its own. I shut the window, pulled the curtains, locked the door. My heart was racing so hard I could barely breathe. I told myself over and over, you're imagining it, but the words had no power. Because the hum was real. The tremor was real. The air itself felt electric, heavy, waiting. I backed away from the window, then stopped cold. There was movement on the wall. It wasn't light or shadow. It was the wall itself bending, warping inward as if something on the other side was pressing against it. The paint cracked. The plaster bulged. And from within that distortion, I saw color, thin veins of shifting light running beneath the surface. Glowing faintly like veins of oil beneath skin, I whispered, no, but it didn't listen. The bulge expanded until a faint circular outline appeared in the center of the wall. For one breathless moment, I thought it was a trick of the light. Then the circle opened. It was the eye. Perfect white, glowing faintly, with a pinprick of black in the middle that pulsed like a heartbeat. The same eye I had seen from the balcony so many years ago. But now it was inside my home, staring through a surface that shouldn't have been capable of eyes. I fell backward, knocking over the coffee table. The hum grew louder until it filled the room, vibrating every object, rattling the glass, shaking the air itself. Then the voice came. Not with sound, but inside me. Inside my skull, my spine, my lungs. You looked at what was not meant to be seen. I covered my ears, though I knew it was useless. Stop, I whispered. You asked for a god, it said, and you found one. My stomach turned. I could barely speak. What do you want from me? To remember. The light in the eye pulsed once, and the world broke apart. The walls dissolved. My apartment vanished. I was standing again on the balcony in Rivamar, the same evening sun burning low, the same sea stretching endlessly into gold. My grandmother was there, her back to me, holding a tray of lemonade. She turned, smiling. For an instant, I believed I had been given another chance. Then her face began to change. Her smile froze. Her skin darkened, her eyes emptied, her mouth opened far too wide. The sound that came out wasn't her voice. It was the same groaning metallic wail that had once filled the sky. Behind her, the clouds split open and the mountain stepped forward, larger than ever, each movement cracking the air like thunder. Stop! I screamed. Please. But there was no stopping it. The eye filled the sky, swallowing the horizon, the town, my grandmother, everything. I could feel it entering me, not physically, but deeper. My thoughts twisted. My memories rewound and folded over themselves. I saw flashes of my childhood from impossible angles, my own face as if I were looking through someone else's eyes. And then I saw something new. The day of the incident. Just before the balcony collapsed, there had been another child, on the balcony above mine. A boy I didn't remember, reaching through the railing, staring at the same horizon. The mountain had turned its eye toward him first, and when it reached for him, the concrete gave way. The falling debris had struck our balcony, saving him, endangering me. But the memory didn't end there. I saw the boy's face clearly now. Pale, terrified, mouth open in a silent scream, and as the mountain's tendrils closed around him, his body dissolved into the same rainbow shimmer that had once stained the brick. It absorbed him completely, and I heard the voice again. Soft, patient, infinite. One must remain to tell of what was seen. The vision shattered. I was back in my apartment, gasping for air, every muscle trembling. The wall was unbroken. The hum was gone. Outside, children were laughing again, as if nothing had happened. But on the floor, beneath my hands, was something that hadn't been there before. A small patch of dust in the shape of a human hand. I touched it. It was warm. For the first time in my life, I understood something terrible. The creature hadn't followed me by accident. It had left me behind on purpose. I was its witness, its memory, its echo. The thing in the mountain hadn't simply seen me. It had marked me, chosen me to remember in its place, and now it wanted me to tell its story. I stood slowly, breathing hard. My reflection in the window was darker than the room behind me, its eyes faintly glowing. My hands shook, but I couldn't look away. I whispered the words aloud, tasting their weight like metal on my tongue. You asked for a god, and you found one. Outside, the horizon flickered. For just a second, I could see it again. The black peak rising beyond the city, tall enough to touch the clouds. Then the light shifted, and it was gone. But the hum stayed. Low, patient, endless. And for the first time, I didn't try to silence it. I listened. I stopped pretending that it wasn't real the day the walls started breathing. That morning, I had awakened to a silence too perfect to be natural. No hum of traffic, no chatter from neighbors, not even the usual clicking of the pipes in the walls. Just a thick, heavy stillness that pressed on my eardrums until it felt like the air itself was watching me. I sat up in bed, my body stiff, my breath fogging the window glass. The world outside was pale and gray. The park below stood empty, the swings moving gently though there was no wind. It felt like the world had been paused halfway through an inhale. When I stepped into the hallway, I saw it. The wallpaper along the corridor was rippling in slow, steady movements, like the gentle rise and fall of lungs. Every few seconds, a faint pulse ran through the floor beneath my feet, timed perfectly with the beating of my own heart. I reached out with trembling fingers, and the surface was warm. Too warm. And when I pressed it lightly, the wall pressed back. That was when the voice spoke again. It wasn't thunderous this time, not the metallic groan that had once shattered the sky. It was a whisper, intimate and calm, curling into my thoughts like smoke. You have remembered me. I froze, my hand still against the wall. What do you want from me? I whispered, my voice barely audible. To see through you. I stumbled backward. No, not again. The whisper deepened, like multiple voices layered on top of each other, a chorus of echoes blending into a single sound. You carry what I cannot hold. You saw me once, and that sight made you mine. I covered my ears, but that did nothing. The voice was inside, blooming behind my eyes. My knees buckled, and I dropped to the floor, gasping. Images flashed in my mind. The balcony, the child on the upper floor, the impossible mountain moving through the mist, its shadow swallowing the sea. And something else, something older. A landscape without cities or oceans, just endless gray plains and the colossal figure standing in the center. Silent, eternal, alone. The voice trembled with sorrow. Once I was seen by the first of you. They called me God. They built mountains to reach me, carved my face into stone, and gave me names. But they looked too long. They saw what eyes were not meant to see. The images shifted again. I saw ancient figures bowing before the same black silhouette, whole civilizations kneeling beneath the shadow of the moving mountain. Then the world burned, swallowed by its own light. I whispered, "Why me?" The voice paused, and the silence that followed was worse than the sound itself. Because you looked back. A tremor shook the floor. The apartment lights flickered, bursting one by one with soft pops. I crawled to my knees, trying to stand, but the air had turned to glass, heavy, thick, impossible to move through. Then the wall in front of me cracked open like an eyelid. A pale light seeped through, illuminating the room in a sickly glow. Through that fissure, I saw something vast, breathing slowly. A surface of shifting smoke and stone, a skin of shadow covered in countless faintly glowing veins. And far, far away within that immensity, a single pupil dilated. I screamed, but no sound came. The wall shattered outward. Wind rushed in, though I was on the 7th floor. My papers scattered like dying birds. The eye widened, its light flickering through every corner of the room. I stumbled backward, tripping over the fallen chair, crashing into the glass door that led to the balcony. The door broke, and I tumbled outside, landing hard against the metal railing, and then I saw it again. The mountain. Not distant this time, but towering directly beyond the horizon. Its base lost in fog, its peak splitting the clouds apart. The city below me flickered between reality and something else. Buildings bending, streets folding upward, cars melting into streaks of color. People walked as if nothing was happening, their eyes blank, their faces blurred. The voice thundered again, though now it filled the sky itself. I made the first light. I carried the first shadow. I am not your god, child of breath. I am what your gods came from. Lightning flared across the sky, but it wasn't lightning. It was movement. The mountain's arms rose again, massive limbs of stone and vapor reaching toward the heavens. The sun vanished behind its form. Everything fell into gray. I clung to the railing, wind whipping through my hair, the world vibrating with an unholy rhythm. For a second, I thought I was falling again. 7 years old, legs burning, screaming for my grandmother. But this time, there was no one to pull me back. I can't see you, I shouted, my voice tearing against the wind. I don't understand what you want. The hum turned into a deep, resonant sound that shook my ribs. The eye focused on me. To be remembered is to exist. Forgetting is death. The ones before you turned away. They erased my name, buried my shape. The silence grew, and I faded. But you saw me again, and I returned. Its shadow crawled over the building, swallowing it whole. My skin burned cold as frost spread across the balcony rails. The metal groaned beneath my hands. You made me, it whispered, when you gave me fear. The words pierced through me like shards of ice. It wasn't just claiming to exist, it was claiming that my terror had fed it, shaped it, made it real again. I stared up into that endless, lightless mass and realized the truth I'd been avoiding my entire life. The mountain had never been a place. It was an idea, a wound in reality. And I had kept it open simply by remembering. The eye dimmed, its edges fraying into smoke. End it, I begged. Please let me forget. For a moment, silence. Then the faintest whisper, then I will take what remembers. The light flared. My mind flooded with pain, a burning white agony that erased everything. My name, my age, my body. I fell backward into a void that had no air, no sound, no time. When I opened my eyes, I was lying on the floor of my apartment. Morning light spilled through the broken balcony door. The hum was gone. The air smelled of dust and sea salt. The world was still. I staggered to my feet, clutching my head. My thoughts were scattered, fading like dreams upon waking. I could barely remember how I'd gotten there. My computer screen was shattered, my phone dead. On the wall opposite me, written in faint streaks of ash, were 5 words I couldn't explain. To be seen is to die. I stared at the words until tears blurred them into nothing. Then, without thinking, I walked to the balcony. The horizon was calm. The mountain stood still. There was no black shape, no moving shadow. Only the slow return of ordinary life. Cars in the distance, the bark of a dog, a woman laughing down the street. But in the glass of the door, in the faint reflection of my face, I saw something else. A pale eye far in the background, watching from the depths of the sky, and as I looked into it, I felt nothing but relief. Because somewhere deep inside, I knew it hadn't gone away. It was waiting. It would always be waiting. And as long as I remembered, it would never die. Chapter 5. The Scar. That remembers, for weeks after the sky went still, I lived in silence. I didn't answer calls, didn't eat much, didn't leave the apartment except to buy water and cigarettes I never smoked. I slept on the floor because the bed felt wrong somehow, as if it remembered the trembling before I did. Each morning I woke up with dust in my mouth, my skin cold, my thoughts half missing like pages torn from a book. I told myself I was healing, but what I was really doing was waiting. The first sign that it wasn't over came from inside me. I began hearing the hum again, but quieter, not from outside or beneath the floor. It was inside my ribs, under my skin, deep in the bones. When I pressed a hand to my chest, I could feel it, a slow vibration matching the beat of my heart. Sometimes at night the rhythm skipped, and when it did, I saw flashes behind my eyelids, a faint red glow, the shape of the mountain rising through the fog. I tried to ignore it. I wrote letters to myself to prove I still existed. They always ended the same way. If you are reading this, you are still here. But the writing began to change. Some mornings, the handwriting on the paper wasn't mine. The words curved differently, the ink heavier, older. And in the margins, faint symbols appeared. Circles, lines, eyes. Always eyes. One evening, as the sun sank behind the buildings, I heard footsteps in the hallway. Slow, deliberate, heavy. They stopped outside my door. I stood frozen, listening. No knock, no sound. Just breathing. Then a whisper slid under the door like smoke. Open it. I backed away. The handle turned once, twice. The metal clicked but didn't move further. I waited until the silence returned, then forced myself forward. I opened the door. No one was there. But the floor outside was covered in dust, fine and pale, arranged in a perfect circle. In its center lay something small, a piece of concrete, cracked and gray, with veins of shimmering color running through it. The colors moved when I looked at them, like oil on water, shifting from blue to red to green. I knew what it was immediately, a piece of the old balcony. I fell to my knees, trembling. The air around it felt heavier, thicker, as if gravity itself bent toward that fragment. I reached out and touched it. The hum stopped. Then the world tilted. My apartment vanished. I was standing once more in the old city of Rivamar, but it wasn't Rivamar as it had been. It was wrong, older, broken, caught between times. The streets were empty. The sea was gone, replaced by a vast plain of ash stretching to the horizon. The sky above hung low, a ceiling of swirling darkness. And in the distance, the mountain moved. It was slower now, older. Its body cracked like cooling lava. Each step sent waves through the air instead of the ground. The eye on its surface flickered weakly, like a dying star. I realized then that it wasn't infinite. It was dying. I felt a voice rise inside me, not in my ears, but in my blood. You carry what I was. I fell to my knees, clutching my head. I don't want this, I whispered. You cannot refuse what remembers. The mountain began to crumble. Chunks of black stone fell away, dissolving into dust before they touched the ground. Through the collapsing surface, I saw faces, human faces, thousands of them, screaming silently, their eyes wide and hollow. They were not alive, not dead. They were memories. The memory of all who had ever looked upon it. The voice trembled, no longer godlike but frail, fading. They forgot me. You will not. I looked down at my hands. The veins beneath my skin glowed faintly, the same shifting colors as the balcony fragment. The hum was growing louder again, beating faster than my heart. I understood then. The mountain hadn't simply chosen me. It had placed itself inside me, piece by piece, waiting for the moment I would remember enough to awaken it again. I screamed, clawing at my chest, desperate to pull it out. But there was nothing to remove. It wasn't an infection or a curse. It was memory itself. The sky tore open. A wind howled across the dead plain, carrying whispers of every voice that had ever spoken the mountain's name. The air shimmered with light and dust and grief. The mountain's eye dimmed, its final words threading through my mind like the last breath of a dying god. If I fade, so will you. One must remain, I didn't think. I just ran. across the endless gray, through the dust and the wind and the sound of worlds collapsing. The ground cracked beneath me, revealing veins of light that pulsed with my heartbeat. My vision blurred. My body burned. I ran until I could no longer tell if I was moving or falling. Then I saw her. Standing in the distance, impossibly clear through the haze, my grandmother Rosa. Her hair loose. Her dress the same pale yellow she had worn that day on the balcony. She was smiling, the way she always did when she caught me drawing on her tablecloths. "Abuela?" I whispered. She reached out a hand. "It's time to rest, mi amor." Tears filled my eyes. "I can't. It's inside me." Her smile softened, and for the first time I saw the fear behind it. "Then give it to the silence." She stepped closer, touching my forehead. The world tilted again. The hum grew louder, unbearable, until it was no longer sound but pressure, crushing everything into nothing. I felt my body unravel, my thoughts scattering like ash, and then, quiet. When I opened my eyes, I was lying on my apartment floor again. Morning light spilled across the room. The balcony door was closed. The fragment of concrete was gone. My hands were clean, no glow beneath the skin. For a moment, I thought it was over. But when I stood and looked in the mirror, I saw it. Faint, but undeniable. A circular scar just above my heart, pulsing slowly, rhythmically. The hum was still there, barely audible, beating in time with me. I turned toward the window. The city was alive again, normal in every way. Cars moved. People laughed. The world had returned to its perfect, ordinary shape. But the mountains on the horizon were different now. One of them was taller, sharper, its shadow reaching farther than the rest. I stared at it for a long time, unable to breathe. Somewhere deep within me, a voice murmured. "Not the god, not the monster, but something smaller. Satyr, I am what you made. I am the fear that became form." I pressed my hand against my chest, feeling the scar throb beneath my palm. I whispered, "Then I'll carry you alone." The hum faded into a sigh. The light shifted. For the first time, the mountain did not move. It simply watched, still and eternal, reflected faintly in the glass of my window. I turned away, picked up my pen, and began to write. Not prayers, not confessions, just truth. The truth that would outlive me. The truth that memory itself is the last religion, and forgetting the only mercy. I wrote until my hand cramped, until the page blurred beneath my tears. And when I finally stopped, I understood what the creature had wanted all along. It didn't need worship. It didn't need sacrifice. It only needed to be remembered. And I had remembered. I still do. Even now, as I sit here decades later, an old man with shaking hands, I can feel the hum beneath the words. I can feel the scar pulsing softly, patient and alive. The mountain still stands beyond the horizon, though no one else can see it. Maybe they forgot. Maybe that's why the world feels lighter to them. But I cannot forget. I close my notebook, and through the open window I hear a faint tremor in the distance. The sound of stone shifting, slow and deliberate, like something vast waking from sleep. I smile, a tired, hollow smile. "I remember," I whisper, and the mountain hums back. The sky darkens, the world holds its breath, and the scar beats once more.